Welcome to another episode of CultureWatch. I'm Mark Rabich, and with me is Bill Muhlenberg in Melbourne. How you going, Bill?
Hey, very well. Good to hear your voice.
Yeah, likewise. And it's been a while, but the world has had quite a tumultuous time in the last sort of 12, 18 months. And one of those things that we're going to talk about today is in the Middle East, of course, with the situation in Israel. Now, this all changed dramatically, or not so much changed, but became, I suppose, more pointed, and the focus was very much on what's going on there since October the 7th, 2023, when that attack occurred from Gaza and many Israelites died. What do you have to comment about that particular day?
Well, of course, if you're an Israeli and have been living there since 1948, you've known what it's like to, well, if not fear for your life, to be on your toes constantly when you're surrounded by dozens of nations that have sworn to want to drive you to the sea, to annihilate you, some of them stating it routinely, some of them having it in their own charters, as in Hamas. Well, October 7 was just, I suppose, one of the more recent things they've been facing for ages now. They've had how many major attacks on them? You can look at least 6, 7 big wars that were launched against Israel since their founding in 48. But yeah, this was certainly one of the more horrific and diabolical attacks with, as you say, over 1,000 killed and so many 250 hostages, of which, there's 53 either dead or alive still remaining to this day. So yeah, in one sense, it was business as usual. Israel knows exactly this is what they face on a daily basis, but it certainly, well, shook them up, and we would have hoped it would have shaken up the rest of the world. You know, finally, wake up, people. Israel is being attacked and surrounded by enemies. They want to destroy us. So you would have thought that finally the international community would, rally around Israel and say, yeah, this was horrific, what was done, the torture, the killing, the rapes, you name it, including the babies and children. You would have hoped that would have woken up much of the world. But sadly, there's a lot of Jew hatred and Israel hatred out there. So for many, it got worse. In fact, the very day after October 7, right, you were having rallies supporting, free Palestine, and Israel's a warmonger and genocide. And it's like nothing changed at all. It's as if it didn't happen. In fact, many denied, right, that it happened, even with the videos we have, even taken by Hamas itself on that day. Their minds are made up. They don't want to believe it. So, again, business as usual for Israel, but sadly, the world hasn't really woken up as they should have.
Now, at the time, Donald Trump wasn't in the White House, and he is now. What has that changed about the way that particular conflict is shaping up now?
Well, massive change. Well, obviously, 4 years of Biden did absolutely nothing to make things safer for Israel, right? Living, something like 42 billion, or was it, I forget the exact figure, of military equipment behind in Afghanistan. Oh, that's going to be handy for the enemies of Israel and America to have all that American military gear, as one debacle after another with Biden at the helm. Well, when he was awake, or when somebody wasn't using auto pen on his behalf. And, I think we can thank thank the good Lord that it wasn't Kamala who got in, because it would have been worse by now. So, yeah, Trump in. He's always made it clear that he's a friend of Israel. He supports Israel. And he's been making it clear of late, now that we know with the Atomic Energy Commission, International Atomic Energy Commission, saying, yes, they do have all the stuff in gear to quickly have anywhere from 10 to 15 nuclear warheads. as part of their missile program. So 60 days Trump gave them to sit down, negotiate. Nothing happened. Iran refused. On day 61, of course, Israel launched its first attacks on those very sites, taking out nuclear scientists, top military brass, trying to get rid of as much of the military structure, well, certainly taking out air power. Now Israel has complete air control over Iran. So, yeah, and this is happening under Trump. Again, it would not have happened under Biden or Kamala. So being a friend of Israel and having Trump saying repeatedly we cannot allow Iran to have nuclear weapons, that's, so far it's been Israel's doing all the dirty work, right? They're doing the heavy lifting here. They're doing everything. But to know that the White House has got their back, and if push comes to shove, well, if nothing else, that last remaining nuclear, it's a mountain compound, some 300 feet below ground, and only America, of all the nations on Earth, only America has the bunker buster, which can be used to hopefully take that out. So again, with Trump there, that's a real possibility. With somebody else like Biden, Kamala, never would be even on the consideration list. So it's a change. And, well, we would say certainly if you think Israel has a right to exist, if Israel has a right to defend itself, it's a change for the better that Trump is in the White House.
So in the wake of the attack by Israel, or the preemptive attack by Israel on Iran and taking out all these facilities and people, you've written a number of articles in the wake of that in the last week. What's been the motivation behind that?
Well, it's obviously a big topic. I mean, if World War III breaks out or a nuclear war, well, I would think everybody would be motivated to at least think about the issue, if not write about it, or certainly pray about it if you're a Christian. So that's one bit. Look, there's many, many aspects. At the moment, I'm reading a book on Ronald Reagan, and especially dealing with his awareness that Soviet communism was an enemy, an existential threat that had to be dealt with. I mean, it already gobbled up, right, half of Europe. And Reagan knew that peace could only come through strength. Strength responds to strength. He knew that the Soviets would not respond to weakness or appeasement, right? None of the Neville Chamberlain kind of stuff. And, well, we know that between Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, and Pope John Paul II, they won the Cold War. We saw the Berlin Wall come crashing down 1989. I remember when it happened. We saw the breakup of Eastern Europe, and we saw the fall of communist Russia. So this is what strong leadership looks like. And again, to bring back to today, strong leadership I see with Trump, and I wouldn't have seen it with a Biden or a Kamala. So that's part of it. I firmly believe, in fact, I at one point started a PhD on this, the whole issue of just war theory and the like. Peace at any price never helps anybody, but peace with justice, that's been a tradition of, in fact, 2.5 millennia. Christians picked up on it, but it was being discussed by the Greek philosophers long before then. What you need is peace, a just peace. Just as you can have a just war to maintain a just peace, you can have unjust wars, and you can have an unjust peace, right? When people are being tyrannized and, well, as in Iran, being murdered, rounded up, put in prisons. If you cover your hair or skin as a woman or a female, you can be arrested, you can be killed. This is a totalitarian, theocratic police state, right? Run by the Ayatollah and his 30,000 clerics. If anybody, certainly a Christian, is concerned about justice, protecting the innocent, and dealing with tyranny, well, this is a pretty good just cause, I would think, to do, as you say, preemptive strikes, certainly to minimize or eliminate the risk of a nuclear armed Iran. I mean, they're bad enough now, but imagine them getting nukes. So there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to discuss. And as I've also said, I'm finding a bit of a reversal of fortune. I wasn't always this way. You might think I'm an old fuddy-duddy conservative and Christian. But in my youth, my wild youth, I was a Marxist. I was a full hater of America, a full hater of the West, of Israel, of the military, of the police, of war, right? I was right up there with the give peace a chance mob and, make love, not war. So I've been there, I've done that. My conversion to Christianity helped me to rethink, which is a good thing. So now I've got a passion to see justice rule as much as possible all over the world. That doesn't mean we go interfering in every hotspot in the world, but some obvious candidates, like what Iran wants to do in Israel and what it was doing with its proxies, right? Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen. That's got to be, you can't just pretend it's not there. You can't hide your head in the sand. So if you want to see justice in at least some parts of the world, a modicum of justice and a modicum of opposition to horrific, tyrannical tyranny, which is Iran in a nutshell, well, we should be concerned about it. We should certainly support Israel, not side against it, which I'm seeing so much of, including from some Christians and conservatives. And, well, at the very least, as we read in the Psalms, we should pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
You mentioned your PhD. I'm just curious how far you got with that and what you covered. I guess one of the things that sort of makes me think is questions such as, should we have fought in World War II? And, you've, in one of the articles, you have quite a few quotes from people like Augustine, Winston Churchill, G.K. Chesterton, C.S. Lewis, George Orwell, that make a case for what you've just been talking about, a just war. And I guess if people took it to the logical conclusion that they're talking about, well, you might not have defeated Hitler.
Well, if you thought that we should always be isolationists, if you thought we should always be pacifists, well, there's been a small minority, if we're talking about Christians, who've always held to that, right? Think the Anabaptists and so on. In fact, they don't even think we should not be involved in government. They don't want anything to do with, right, police, anything there. That's how far off they are in terms of wanting nothing to do with the use of force. But the majority of Christian thought and non-Christian, you mentioned both in your list there, the majority of thinkers have always recognized there is a place for just war theory, primarily in the sense of a defensive war done as a last resort, limited means, limited objectives. There's a list of, anywhere from 7 or 8 kind of main criteria of how we might understand a just war. But what we need to know is, obviously, if you can't see what Hitler was doing was a just cause to stop him, A, from killing millions of Jews, B, taking over all of Europe, and then C, his stated intention to take over the rest of the world, well, if you don't think that's a just cause as a defensive war, well, we might be on a different moral page than people like that. The overwhelming majority knew, as did Churchill, that we were right. Appeasement doesn't work. Neville Chamberlain was wrong. He went off, had a meeting with Hitler in Germany, and a week later, Hitler invaded Czechoslovakia. So much for that kind of utopianism. And it plays out throughout history, right? Back when Bill Clinton was in the White House, we actually had a chance to take out North Korea's nuclear program. Of course, he, as another Democrat, refused to act on that one. Now, of course, it's way too late. North Korea is armed to the teeth, and, if it ever gets even more belligerent than it already is, well, there was a case for a preemptive strike, and that's exactly what now Israel is doing in Iran. A preemptive strike, not to take out everything they have, but certainly to neutralize their nuclear ambitions, which they've, well, for 25 years now, they've been telling us what their ambitions are. A, they hate Israel. B, they want to get nukes. And C, they're going to use them. So this is a preemptive attack on Iran. We would call it part of the just war tradition. And I think most people see Israel as being morally defensible in doing this very thing.
And of course, you're talking more about the government than you are about the people of Iran, because you wrote in the articles about how there's a number of a large proportion of the people in Iran who are actually pro-Israel, which is something that surprised me to hear.
Yeah, well, it's a good point to raise. When Israel is talking about neutralizing Iran, it's not talking about neutralizing its 92 million citizens, most of whom do not support the Ayatollah and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. The majority, anywhere 75-80% of Iranians, are hoping they'll be liberated. They're hoping somebody will free them from this oppressive theocracy. So many have already expressed their praise for Israel, and they're hoping Israel wins. So yeah, ordinary Iranians, just like many people in most countries, they're sick and tired of this tyranny. They're sick and tired of this oppression. They're sick and tired of these theocrats controlling every second and ounce of their lives, right? Whether you can drive a car, whether you can go out without being covered from head to toe. Those are real things, and Iran has traditionally been more, if you would say, in the Western camp. They've wanted to have more freedoms, be more like the West. In fact, were, right, until the Shah was disposed of back in 1979, and they've been under, 46 years now of tyranny, Islamic tyranny. So yeah, the Iranians, at least quietly, if not openly, are cheering Israel and begging Israel to complete the job in terms of getting rid of the Ayatollah and any of the other big wigs who are oppressing them. So it's a good point. The people of Iran, well, we're seeing the same right now, right, in Gaza as well. A lot of the people in Gaza are now rising up against Hamas. They're sick of Hamas. Same thing, same oppression, same corruption, a group of leaders who are living the good life while everybody else is suffering. So it's the same everywhere. The ordinary people hate tyranny. They love freedom. And sometimes they just kind of wish, boy, if we could only get some help from the free West, we would, we'd love to have it. So that's kind of the state of play at the moment.
So a lot of what you hear these days is that there's a genocide which Israel is committing, and it seems now not just on the Palestinians, but potentially on the Iranians. And what would you say if you had somebody saying such things? And you probably have encountered that on social media. What do you say to people who say these kind of things?
Yeah, look, you get it all the time. I mean, they're living in a world of unreality. I mean, October 7 was a case of genocide, right? What Hitler did was genocide. When your declared aim is to wipe out an entire people, again, Hamas charter, we want to see Israel completely annihilated. Iran has been saying that. Many of the 22 Arabic nations surrounding tiny Israel have said exactly that. They are the ones calling for genocide. So if we go back to the criteria of just war theory, well, one is to, as much as possible, minimize collateral damage, right? You don't want to take out civilians. You only want to target combatants, not non-combatants. So here's another easy way to look at all this. Hamas thrives on and believes in bunkering down when civilians are all about, right? Whether it's a hospital, a school, a mosque, you name it. Guess where the Hamas military installations are? Guess where their command and control centers are? Yep, in hospitals or underneath in the basement. Schools, mosques. If they see all kinds of civilians killed when Israel tries to defend itself in surgical strikes, guess what? Civilians will get killed. Hamas loves it. Why? Great PR value. Oh, this is great. All the clueless Western media, well, come around. They'll take pictures. And by the way, often it's quite staged. You see the same, so-called dead civilians used in one shot after another, one strike after another. So the West buys it up because they're, useless idiots, as Lenin referred to them. They come in handy for the PR battle. So Hamas doesn't care how many civilians are killed. On the other hand, Israel, being a civilized nation, does. So look at Iran. Iran right now is pumping ballistic missiles anywhere and everywhere into Israel, including just the other day, right? The hospital directly targeted by Iran. Now, what has Israel done in Iran? Well, targeted strikes. We've had this technology now for 20, 25 years at least. You can have precision bombing. Right now, Israel can send a warhead down a chimney through a vent in a window, and we actually have pictures of that, right? Some of the top brass of Iran, they were taken out in their bedrooms, right? The whole building they are in is standing. It wasn't pulverized like Iran is doing to Israel. It was a surgical, tactical strike, getting rid of specific military targets. Sure, there'll always be some collateral damage, cannot be helped. But the difference between Israel, in fact, they warn, they'll use any means possible to warn, whether it's Gaza or Iran. They'll say, hey, we're coming, we're going to strike, you might need to take some cover. How does that ever become translated into genocide? People doing genocide do not warn ahead of time what their military plans are. Guess what? Iran is not making those kind of warnings. Hamas is not. So this talk of genocide is, well, it's madness. There is genocide, but it sure isn't coming from Israel. It's coming from Israel's enemies.
Okay, well, I guess even if you fall on one side of this issue or another, you might be very fearful. And as a Christian, what would be your advice or counsel to someone who's looking at this situation and some of the escalation that's sort of happened, or skirmishes over the last little while, and is thinking, are we heading towards World War III? What's going to happen with this? Am I safe? And fearing the future effectively, and even thinking about end time scenarios. What's your counsel to people who are thinking along those lines?
Well, plenty can be said there. Partly it depends if you're a Christian, if you're looking at eschatology, right, prophecy. That's one way to look at it. By the way, much of what I said and much of what I've written has really been to give it from a secular point of view. That is, whatever views I may or may not have on how Israel fits in the prophetic clock, or, the relationship between Israel and the church, I'm leaving that out for the time being. I'm simply saying what any Joe Pagan could say. Israel has a right to be a sovereign nation. It has a right to defend itself. And any normal civilized human being should be absolutely shocked at what happened on October 7. So I think the case can be made on secular grounds. If you want to argue biblical, that's another matter. As far as that goes, Christians know that there are some things worse than death. There are some things worse than war, right? And again, we go back to World War II now, right? What would have been worse than for the Allies to try to stop Hitler? Well, I could think pretty easily what would have been worse for Hitler to have succeeded. Well, first of all, either now you and I would be speaking German or Japanese, so that's one outcome, but the whole world could well have fallen to Hitler. I would think that's a worse, more morally worse outcome. than having to sometimes go to war to stop tyranny and stop unjust aggression. So it's the same here. We're obviously hoping it's not going to lead to World War III. Nobody wants a war. I don't. You get the left and some, what we call the woke right throwing around the term, oh, you're a bunch of warmongers. No. By the way, as I say, reading this book on Reagan, he was not a warmonger by any means, but he knew what was a worse threat with Soviet communism. So I think if we can get some more limited strikes by Israel, certainly get rid of that nuclear capability, that'll make the world safer, right? It'll make it more likely to have peace and less likely to have war if we can get that threat taken care of. Sure, there'll always be new threats, new enemies, new problems, but, you take them one at a time. So I hope we don't have war. I pray for peace. We all should pray for peace. But again, it's got to be peace with justice, not peace with tyranny, aggression, and the innocents being slaughtered and tortured and imprisoned. So let's pray to that end, but let's also support those who are on the front lines right now, namely Israel, trying not only to protect its own men, women, and children, but really, they're effectively helping to protect the West. Too much of Europe and the rest of the West have been just cowardly. They've done nothing to stop the enemies of Israel, who are also the enemies of the West. And we can close with this line, right? 2 lines. One, Iran refers to America as the great Satan, refers to Israel as the little Satan. So guess what? If Iran gets its nukes and takes out Israel, they do not stop there. Then they go after America. And the second thing is this, a very well-known saying by the Islamists and terrorists is this, after Saturday comes Sunday. What does that mean? Well, after we get rid of all the Jews, not just in Israel, but in the world, then we go after and try to get rid of all the Christians. So if you're a Christian, think, what's Israel is none of my business. Let them fend for themselves. Well, they're living in dream time. Their heads are in the sand. If Israel goes, the really only effective safeguard we have right now in the Middle East goes, and then the program to take out America, the West, and certainly the Christians in the West, that'll go ahead full steam. So we need some realism here. We need to wake up. We need to stop listening to all the wrong voices, and we need a bit of moral and mental clarity, not just on war and peace, but what political Islam is all about.
That's a great way to finish. All right, Bill, thanks very much for this episode of Culture Watch Radio.
Enjoyed it. Maybe we can do it again.
Exactly. See you next time for Culture Watch Radio.